Welcome to the True Alien Podcast. Ready for today's paranormal probe?
Always. What have we got?
We're diving deep, really deep into file #18. The Voronezh Landing. This is back in 1989 in Russia.
Ah, VORONEZH. Yes, that one's memorable.
Right. Forget your usual UFO flaps. This one's got giant aliens, a kid who apparently vanished, weird radiation.
And the kicker, the official Soviet news agency, TASS, actually called it credible.
Exactly. Credible. So yeah, prepare to have your reality adjust a bit today.
Well, it definitely stands out. You know, late 80s, Cold War winding down, and boom, this happens not in some desert, but a city park.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's late September 89, Voronezh, Russia. Like you said, about 300 miles south of Moscow.
And the park, Yuzhny Park, which, fun fact, means South Park.
No way, seriously. South Park. Okay, that's just weirdly perfect.
Isn't it? So picture this. Ordinary Tuesday afternoon, kids playing soccer, just normal park stuff.
Until it wasn't normal anymore, something shows up.
Yeah, something big. Witnesses described this massive object. Some said a glowing sphere, others a sort of flattened disc.
And my color.
Usually reported as this deep red, maybe pinkish color, and huge, like bigger than a bus, most people agreed.
Bigger than a bus, landing in a park.
And landing silently. That's key. No engine noise, just down it came.
Okay, that's already pretty strange, but then it gets stranger, right? Doors open.
Doors slide open, and outcome? Then, well, beings, not little green men.
No, definitely not. These were giants, like 9 to 12 feet tall.
That's the description. Huge figures in these silvery suits or overalls, maybe clunky boots.
And the heads.
Yeah.
Small heads on these massive bodies.
Relatively small heads, yeah. But the eyes, that's what really seems to have stuck with the witnesses.
3 eyes. Is that right?
3 eyes seems to be the most common report. Whether it was one central eye or 3 distinct ones, accounts differ a bit. Some even said they glowed.
Glowing eyes. Okay.
Yeah.
Just dialing up the creep factor.
And there was possibly more. Some witnesses mentioned a smaller companion, boxy looking, like a robot.
So giant 3-eyed aliens and a robot just pop out for a stroll during a soccer game.
Right, pretty much. One of the giants apparently starts, moving around, looking, observing.
And then a kid does what kids sometimes do.
Oh, yeah.
Yells something.
Apparently, yeah. Someone shouted. Maybe out of fear, maybe just being a teenager.
And that didn't go over well.
Seems not. According to the accounts, the giant pulls out this device, like a tube or a pistol, about 20 inches long.
Okay.
Points it at one of the kids. A 16-year-old boy, Vasya Surin, is a name that comes up often, but it varies.
Fires it.
Fires this beam of light, and the boy, he just vanishes.
Vanishes. Like gone. Complete.
Gone. 1 second there, next second, nothing. Just empty space where he was standing.
Wow. Can you even process seeing that? Your friend just blinked out of existence.
It must have been terrifying, utterly bewildering.
But he came back, didn't he? That's part of the story, too.
He did. After a few moments, must have felt like an eternity, he reappears. Just as suddenly.
Was he okay?
Witnesses said he seemed stunned. Maybe paralyzed initially. Just frozen.
Understandable. And what about the giants?
Before anyone could really react, the giant and the robot thing apparently went back into the craft.
Did they leave anything behind? I read something about a symbol.
Some reports mention a glowing triangle symbol etched on the ground where the craft was. Then it just lifted off, silently again, and zipped away. Fast.
Okay. So the kids see this insane event. What happens next? They run home.
They tell their parents, naturally, and you can imagine those conversations.
Mom, Dad, a giant 3-eyed alien made Vasya disappear.
Yeah, I bet that went down well.
Right. But enough kids were telling the same basic story, apparently. Word got around. Eventually, it reached the authorities, local police.
And they actually investigated.
They did. And not just the police. The scientists from Voronezh State University got involved, too. They went to the park looking for, well, anything.
Did they find anything? Physical evidence? That's the claim. They reported finding these deep gouges in the ground, like something really heavy had rested there.
Consistent with a bus-sized object landing.
Exactly. But more than that, they supposedly detected elevated radiation levels.
Radiation? What kind?
The reports often mention cesium-137, specifically, and also magnetic anomalies in that spot. Strange readings.
Cesium-137, isn't that related to nuclear stuff?
It is. It's a fission product. Not something you'd expect to find lying around in Yuzhny Park.
Okay, so physical traces, weird radiation. But then comes the really mind-bending part. TAC.
TASS. October 9th, 1989, the official Soviet news agency, they run the story.
And they don't just report it as some kooky tale.
No, They quote the scientists, the witnesses, and they use the word credible. Tass calls the reports credible.
That's insane. For the Soviet Union in 1989, that's unheard of.
Completely unprecedented. Think about it. The state's official mouthpiece basically saying, yeah, maybe aliens landed. It sent the story absolutely global. Everyone was talking about Voronezh. Why? Why would they do that? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. It elevates this case beyond just eyewitness accounts. The official stamp, however brief or bizarre, makes it unique.
Okay, let's unpack some of the implications here. High strangeness, as they say.
Definitely high strangeness.
First off, if these were aliens, they just didn't seem to care about the Cold War, did they? Landing in a Soviet city like it's nothing.
Right. It suggests their concerns, whatever they are, operate on a totally different level than human politics. Geopolitics just wasn't on their radar, apparently.
Or maybe it was in a way we don't understand. Who knows?
Exactly. It makes you wonder about their motives. Why there? Why then? Why reveal themselves? Even briefly, like that.
And what about the kids? The witnesses were mostly children, right?
Primarily, yes. Which often leads to skepticism, but...
But sometimes kids are maybe better witnesses for really weird stuff because they don't have the same filters. That's one line of thinking. They might just report what they see without trying to fit it into a pre-existing box. Research on child testimony is complex, of course. They can be suggestible, but the consistency across multiple independent kids in Voronezh, that's harder to dismiss just as fantasy. Something clearly impressed them all in a very similar way.
Which brings us back to TASS. The confirmation. I still can't get over that. This wasn't exactly glasnost extending to UFOs, was it?
Hardly. The Soviet government was famously secretive and dismissive of anything paranormal or unexplained, so why publicize this?
Theories.
Well, maybe they were genuinely baffled and put it out there almost as a request for information. Unlikely, but possible.
Or a distraction. Something else was going on.
Also possible. The timing was interesting, with everything happening in Eastern Europe. Or perhaps some internal faction wanted the story out for reasons we don't know. Maybe a failed attempt to explain away some secret weapon test.
A weapon that looks like a giant three-eyed alien and makes kids disappear. Seems a stretch.
It does. It just adds layers to the mystery. It's so unlike the usual denial or silence you'd expect.
And the physical evidence. It confirms something happened, right?
Yeah.
Even if we don't know what.
The gouges, the reported radiation, the magnetic anomalies. Yes, they suggest a real physical event occurred in that spot. But interpreting what caused them, that's the tricky part.
Could the cesium-137 have another explanation?
Well, it's highly unusual. Could it have been planted? Maybe. But why? An unknown industrial accident nearby. Possible, but seems unlikely to be so localized and unreported. Could it be related to the craft's propulsion? Pure speculation, of course.
And the magnetic readings.
Also strange. Could be residual effects from powerful energy fields, maybe propulsion related again, or maybe connected to the device used on the boy. We just don't know. It's data without context.
Let's quickly touch on the kid's own words. We mentioned Vasya, the boy who vanished.
His account is central, obviously. Talking about being gone, then back, feeling stunned.
Then there were others, like Xenia, describing the giants and the light beam, and Yulia just insisting it was real.
The accounts, even if slightly varied in detail, share that core narrative. The descriptions of the beings, the craft, the vanishing. There's a strong thread of consistency. They sound like people describing something genuinely shocking and strange, not reciting a rehearsed story.
And wasn't it just that one group of kids playing soccer? Weren't there other potential witnesses in the area?
That's another important layer. There were reports, yes, from other people in or near the park around that time who claimed to see strange lights or the object itself, maybe from a distance.
So not just isolated to the soccer players.
It suggests a wider event, potentially observed by more people, which again makes a simple hoax or shared delusion harder to sustain.
And the ground impressions. They indicated serious weight, right? This wasn't a balloon or anything light.
According to the reports from the scientists who examined them, yes. The depth and nature of the marks suggested significant pressure, consistent with a very heavy object setting down. Rules out flimsy explanations.
And the classic element. Disappearing evidence. What about those rock samples?
Ah, yes. The story goes that the scientists collected some unusual rock samples from the landing site, maybe fused soil or something.
Yeah.
And then they vanished, went missing from the lab or confiscated. It's a common trope in UFO cases, adds to the conspiracy feel.
Convenient, isn't it?
Or just bureaucratic incompetence, perhaps. Or maybe they were never significant to begin with. Without seeing them, it's just another loose end.
I mentioned the park name, Yuzhny Park, South Park. Still funny.
It adds that little touch of the absurd, doesn't it?
And the timing. Just before the Berlin Wall fell.
Yeah.
Major shifts happening. Coincidence?
Almost certainly a coincidence, but it places the event firmly in that era of incredible change, especially within the Soviet Union. Adds historical texture.
Did this event, open the door slightly for Soviet UFO researchers? You mentioned TASE.
It seems it did, temporarily. While there was always a kind of underground interest in UFOs there, the Voronezh incident, being so public and semi-officially acknowledged, probably emboldened some researchers and brought the topic out of the shadows, if only for a moment.
It's interesting how often kids are the primary witnesses in these big cases. You mentioned Ariel School, Broadhaven, Westall. It's often schools or parks.
It is a pattern. Why kids? Why those locations? Are they more perceptive, as we speculated? Are those just places where large groups gather outdoors? Or is there something about those encounters that specifically targets or involves children?
That's a whole other can of worms.
It really is. A fascinating and slightly disturbing pattern in some parts of the lore.
So, okay, alien visitors is the big theory. What else gets thrown around for Voronezh? Mass hysteria.
That's always a possibility with groups, especially under stress. But the reported physical evidence complicates that.
Secret Soviet tech. Holograms. Some kind of energy weapon test that got seen.
Plausible, maybe? Testing advanced tech is certainly something the military does. But again, the specific details, 9-foot aliens, vanishing kids, seem awfully elaborate for a technology test, unless the goal was psychological impact.
Hoax.
Difficult to orchestrate with so many kids. The consistency and the reported physical traces and the task report seems unlikely to fool scientists and the state news agency, even temporarily.
What about, weirder stuff? Interdimensional beings.
That falls into the category of explanations that are almost as strange as the event itself. A bleed-through from another reality. It's out there, but for some, it fits the high strangeness better than nuts and bolts spacecraft.
But really, after all this time, there's no neat answer, is there?
None at all. That's why Voronezh endures. It defies easy categorization. You have credible-seeming witnesses, you have reported physical data, and you have that utterly bizarre official acknowledgement. It ticks too many boxes to just ignore.
So the Voronezh incident just hangs there, doesn't it? Leaves us scratching our heads. Yeah. What really went down in that park back in '89?
Was it genuine contact? A very strange military experiment? Something else we can't even conceive of?
The mix is just potent. The kids' stories, the reported science stuff, and P.S.
It all makes this paranormal probe one that just doesn't resolve. It really pushes you to think.
So we want you, listening, to think, too. Dig into it yourself. What makes the most sense to you? Or what part just seems completely impossible to explain? What's the element of the Voronezh landing that sticks with you the most?